So that's what we're sort of fighting against. In the perfect world, we'd be able to do all the things we want to do to make the world a better place, but you've got to pick and choose. So that can be quite hard.
This is Down to Earth Conversations, where we hear from ordinary people who are helping to bring a bit of heaven down to earth. Kia ora, welcome to another episode of Down to Earth Conversations with me, your host, Andy Dixon. First, in real time here, it's just been a few days since the Treaty Principles Bill was voted down by Parliament. This is a bill that has caused huge division in Aotearoa New Zealand, but also huge amounts of unity, with Māori and non-Māori fighting against this bill together. And the church in Aotearoa has also been largely united against this bill and the way that it would rewrite history from the colonisers' point of view. It's still a farce that it got as far as it did, in my opinion, costing millions for a bill that was promised to fail before the government even formed. But yay Aotearoa for standing up and saying no to the harmful ideologies behind this bill. If you want to learn more about it, make sure to listen to the next episode with Kate and Alex from Common Grace Aotearoa, where we unpack it a little bit further. But to today's episode and my wonderful guest, Phillipa Hunt. Phillipa is a wife, mum, engineer, environmentalist, and the founder and chairperson of Satisfy Food Rescue. We talk about the environment, food poverty, Satisfy, working to our strengths, partnering with others, and where faith fits into all of that for her. This is episode 108 of Down to Earth Conversations. Here's Phillipa Hunt. Kia ora, Phillipa. Welcome to the podcast.
Kia ora.
For those who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ka mihi o ki te maunga ko mangatiri, ka mihi o ki te awa ko rakahuri, tēnā korua, tēnā korua. Ko Ngāti Pākehā o Aotearoa tōku iwi, ko Oto Tahi ahau, e noho ana ahau ki Waikaku Beach, ko ahau te hia mana o Satisfy Food Rescue, ko Phillipa Hunt ahau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So I'm Phillipa Hunt. I'm the chairperson and founder of Satisfy Food Rescue. I grew up here in Ototahi, and I live on Waikaku Beach.
Nice.
Yeah.
Why is a Pākehā? Is it something that you think about to introduce yourself in Te Reo?
Oh, that's a good question. I was actually just writing about that recently from a tikanga point of view, like more sort of holistically. I just think it's the right thing for us. Like my family's been in this country, I can kind of count probably 7 generations on both sides. Wow. So we've been here for a long time, but, we aren't the original tangata whenua. We don't own this land, not that anyone really can own land from how I see it, but it's the right thing to do to honour those who have been before us and who are the first people of a land. I just see it as it's just totally the right thing to do, and it's also really interesting to learn about their culture and to learn what's important and to see the synergies between, say my own worldview and the Te Ao Māori worldview. So
cool. Yeah. You didn't know I was going to spring that question, but
it's all good.
I always find it interesting because it's becoming more common, and just seeing what is it that drives people to do that. And no, that's really cool. One of the things that we're going to talk a lot about during this conversation is the environment, because that's part of what you're passionate about. And I guess I want to know, is that something you've always cared about, or was there kind of a moment where things shifted, or was it a journey, or I don't know, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I have reflected on this a lot over my life, but I feel like it's been quite innate to who I am. I can't tell you a specific moment, but I feel like it's got a lot to do with how I was brought up and that we spent a lot of time in the outdoors. We were, I feel, a little kind of privileged in saying this, that we were a family who skied. And I know skiing is an expensive sport, but we do ski at a club hill, so we've always done it as cheaply as we could.
Yes.
But that was my experience. And growing up, I was in the mountains a lot in the winter, and in the summer we went camping. And so I just always remember, even as a child, being taken away or in awe of the environments that I found myself in, particularly in the mountains. And I think that's probably where that started. So, I could probably trace it back to my upbringing and thank my parents for that. But I've always felt very strongly connected to New Zealand and the land here and the beautiful environments that we have here, the lakes and the mountains and the sea and we're just so privileged in the forests. I've always been, I studied engineering and I did forestry engineering, and even though it's engineering, I was still called a tree hugger. And I love that. I love it that I'm a tree hugger. But, my reason for going into that discipline was to try and help the environmental practices from within the industry. I never ended up doing that, but that was my original motivation. So, I've always loved trees. And as I've grown older, grown to appreciate more and more aspects of, creation and our environment. So it's always been there for me.
How does that transfer into life on a daily basis for you? Like, what does it mean that you love the environment? Does it change how you live?
On different levels. So I think for me it means I do have to get outside. I have to, and for me, one of my big things is I not just get outside, but I need to get up high. I need to be on the top of mountains or ridges. For me, that's a kind of a need. So if I haven't done that in a while, it's like, I need to get out there, either go for a tramp or a walk, or if it's in the winter, get up skiing. So there's that, but then for me there's that awareness always of what I'm doing and how it's either being positive or negative on the environment around me. And I suppose it's one of my frustrations is that there's so many more things I could be doing, but I feel in some ways quite constrained financially.
Yep.
I don't own an EV because I can't afford to own one. I don't have solar panels on my house because I can't afford to. And part of the fact, it's sort of this weird, tension, is the reason I don't have the money to do that is because of the choices I've made, largely due to my worldview of not striving for money and making choices that are actually meant to be better for the environment and better for communities and people, but then it means that I don't necessarily have the funds to be able to do all the things that I'd like to. But when it comes to just things like obviously having compost and being on your bike as much as you can and not wasting food in the house and little things like that, trying to avoid plastic, although plastic just does my head in. You can't go to a supermarket without just feeling terrible about how much plastic there is.
We do a lot of the soft plastic recycling, but we used to have chickens, and so we've got these big chicken feed bags that we fill up, and I take them down, and it's like just this mountains of plastic that I take down to Woolworths to put into the bins to get that recycled. But you kind of, once you start collecting it, you realise how much of it there is.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. Like just about everything you buy comes with plastic wrapped around it, which is... Yeah,
I know.
It's a challenge.
It is, and going for walks on the beach. Living in Waikuku, we have the privilege to be able to do that regularly, which is great. But the amount of plastic I pick up off the beach, it's just horrible. And the thoughts of those different photos that we've seen over the years of the effects of plastic on sea life and seabirds, it's just tragic. So every time I'm picking up a piece of plastic, I'm like, I'm saving that one little animal from death or disease. But it's things like that, I suppose, they're just always front of mind for me.
Yeah. One of the things you mentioned there is like not wasting food. And as we're going to get into the conversation more, we're going to talk a lot more about food. And that idea of the importance of food, the importance of caring for the food that we have. How did you become passionate about that? Was it linked to the environment stuff? Was it different experience? Was it, I don't know. What does that look like?
Well, food for me has always been a big thing. I've always enjoyed food. I feel like most people do, don't they? And I've always I was always hassled as a child. I always used to eat a lot. But also, I've always enjoyed good food. So I've always been interested in food. But it's strange that you kind of ask in that way because I haven't really thought about it, strangely, in respect to how I got into the whole food waste thing. I think actually my sort of reason for saving food partly is linked to finding out about sort of the global issues of food waste, but also prior to that I think it's basically because I'm a bit stingy. I don't have that money like I was talking about, so I try to make the most of everything that I have because I don't want to. I spent money on something, I don't want to waste it, or I grew it in the garden and I don't want to waste the amount of time and effort that went into doing that. So I think inherently I'm a little bit stingy.
I totally relate. It's the kids bring home like in their lunchbox an apple that they've had like one little nibble of. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, do you know how much apples cost?
Yeah. And then you chop it up and eat it because you cut the bit out.
Yeah. Yeah. So figuring out ways to do that. We used to have chickens that we fed a lot with it, but we ended up passing those on because we just didn't have the time to properly look after them, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that is it. A lot of it comes down to time, doesn't it? Like, so, the choices you make into the sort of things that you want to make a difference with. It's either time or money. And obviously I mentioned the money side of things, but time comes into it a lot as well. The choices we've made in our family usually relate to how much investment and time we want to put into it. Like, we don't have chickens because I kind of know, well, firstly, they're expensive to feed. And secondly, I don't think I'd probably give them the time they need. So, we're happy, my husband and I are happy to have a veggie garden. We're not great veggie gardens, but we try. We do our best. And, like the soft plastic recycling, you can do that. You make the choices of the things that fit into your lifestyle, but, there's the ones that you sort of feel like, you think, I could do that, but do I have the time? Like, actually avoiding all plastic. Like, that is a really big thing to do, or trying to really reduce your rubbish output. And there are people who do that, and they, you see it on social media and that they've done amazing work, but then to try and do it, and that's why, Plastic-Free July is a great example. You can do it for a month, and you can hope that maybe one little aspect of what you did in that month you can take on and do it throughout a whole year. But to do the whole thing for a whole year, it takes a huge amount of commitment and time, and it actually almost absorbs everything that you're doing.
And especially when the systems are set up in a way that doesn't cater for you to be able to do that well.
Absolutely. So, and that's what we're sort of fighting against. In the perfect world, we'd be able to do all the things we want to do to make the world a better place, but you've got to pick and choose. So that can be quite hard. Yeah.
So tell us about Satisfy Food Rescue. How did that come about? What is it, for those who don't know, and how did it start?
So Satisfy is a charity, and we're based in Kaipoi, which is just north of Christchurch, and we rescue food. So we take food from supermarkets that would otherwise have been destined for landfill or animal feed, but it's still edible, so it's it's still good food, and we sort it, make sure it's all good, and distribute it to organisations who are already helping those in need. So we're kind of like a logistics organisation in a way, a middle person who finds food, usually perishable, and diverts it to those who are already doing really good work on the coalface. And, historically, food banks and similar they've had no problems getting the non-perishables, although I say no problems, but, it's definitely up and down whether or not they get the food they need. But perishable food's always been a challenge for them because it's hard for them to store it or even to source it. And so Food Rescue works really well to support them in that space, because we can get food to them quite quickly, and they can then move it out quickly and on a regular basis. So they're not just sort of getting it once a month, they're getting it every week, and they can move that out to their clients, and it gets used in that sort of period of time where the perishables are still good for eating. Yeah, and so I got started with Satisfy, well, it's over 10 years ago now, and I just was reading a magazine article back in 2013, and it was about food rescue, and I'd never heard of the concept before, and it just seemed to me it was like the perfect concept. And the reason that got me, well, I'm about to say excited, because it wasn't actually excited, it was more of a jaw-dropping moment, was when I read in the article the piece of data that came out of the UN back in 2011 that estimated that a third of the food that's produced for human consumption goes to waste.
A third?
A third. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. That's like criminal. And it was that piece of information that, basically started me on this journey. And that article talked about Kibosh in Wellington. It's New Zealand's sort of first dedicated food rescue organisation. And then also City Harvest in New York. And they are probably the world's first. They've been going since back in the 1980s. So it was a really interesting article. And, that's what basically started me thinking about how could we do something similar in North Canterbury. And apart from that sort of data point of that third of the food being wasted, the other reason, like I was sort of mentioning before, is that it's such a cool concept because it brings together two things that I'm really passionate about, obviously the environment and trying to reduce waste, and then also the sort of food poverty, social justice side of things, which I've also always been hugely passionate about, and just brings them together in such a beautiful way that you're focusing on reducing food waste and reducing food poverty. So I love the concept, and so far it's worked really well in practice. So cool. Hence I'm still going strong with it.
The idea of being that kind of logistics company and supplying those who are already doing it. Like I know some of the food rescue groups sort of start up their own food bank kind of thing.
Yeah.
Was that ever a thought, or was it always actually we can help these people that are already doing stuff?
Yeah.
There's a missing link in the chain.
Yeah.
We can be that.
I think that was it for me. I really liked that idea. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, when I first was introduced to the idea, I was looking at Kibosh and City Harvest, and both of their models are that very much intermediary role, although City Harvest I think does more than that now. But then the other side of it is, for me personally, I don't know, I don't feel like I'm great working on the coalface. Yeah. I feel like my skills and strengths are better used in that sort of, I suppose, logistics, administrative kind of area. I don't have empathy as one of my strengths. It's like in my bottom three if we're talking about, strength finder type thing. So I kind of knew my lane, and I felt that would work well for me. And then also the people who I got alongside me originally, a lot of them were working in the social sector and had a lot of contacts and knew which groups needed help. So I already knew that there were groups out there who needed our support. So I was like, well, I don't need to replicate that. It'd be great to be able to support the work that's already happening out there. So, that's kind of where it all stemmed from.
I think that's really important to know what your lane is and know what your strengths are. I think Strengths Finder is an amazing tool.
Yeah.
For those who haven't done that before, definitely look it up. Is it Gallup?
Yes.
No, Clifton. Clifton's, it's all the same thing.
It's all the same.
Look up Gallup or Clifton Strengths Finder and you'll find it online. But not a typing thing. It's not telling you what your personality type is like. It's just telling you where your key strengths are and also where your key strengths aren't, which is just as important to know. My experience was working, I got really passionate about social justice and ended up working for an organisation on the coalface and nearly burnt out because it wasn't where I naturally sit. Yeah. It wasn't my skill set. There were social workers there who were getting super excited about these minute little changes in the clients, and I was getting depressed because change wasn't happening fast enough, and things like that I just went, actually, you could be 100% passionate about a cause and not be the right person to do a particular role within it.
Absolutely.
And that was huge learning for me. And I think a lot of people who have these ideas to start charities or just to do good work maybe they get confused by that and think, if I'm going to help, I have to help in this particular way, not realising actually we need all the different people. You know, we need the people like yourself doing the organising, because a lot of people that are the great coalface people are terrible organisers. I mean, let's just be honest. I know a lot of people who are great at all that social work stuff and don't have organisational bone in their body.
Yeah.
But equally, there's those of us who have more ability in the organising and don't have that ability to connect in the same way that they do. So it's all needed.
It is, yeah.
And so I think that was really great that you saw that and didn't try and do something else. Were you working at the time? Like what?
Yeah, so at the time I was working part-time. So like I said earlier, I'm an engineer, studied here at the University of Canterbury doing forestry engineering, but I've never worked in that. I've always worked in sort of the civil side, particularly in road asset management. So I was working part-time doing that 3 days a week, and my kids were about to, my son had been at school for a couple of years and my daughter was about to start school. So, you know, it's like I had so much time. I remember the interview when I was, thinking about the concept, and it was one of the local papers came and she's like, so when are you going to have the time to do this? I'm like, oh, well, my daughter's starting school. Because that's just going to give me so much more time. Yeah. So basically what happened is I went from looking after preschoolers on my 2 days a week when I wasn't working to working on Satisfy. So I just exchanged one sort of unpaid job for another. I mean, obviously the parenting job continues unpaid continually, but that's pretty much when it happened. That was that transition from having preschoolers to having Satisfy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And how did you go from I've got this idea to actually getting it off the ground? Like, because you need more than one person to get something like that happening. Yeah, so it sat there for ages just in the back of my head. I think I probably pondered on it for maybe 6 months or so. Yeah, right. And then at a church service at the end of the year, we had this visiting speaker. His name was Captain Phil Clark, and he was the former National Director of the Church Army in New Zealand. He's unfortunately since died of cancer, which is really sad. But at the time, he did a really good talk on what is it that God's calling you to do or asking you to join God in, and are you willing to step out and actually do that? And so for me, that was like, sometimes, you sit through church services and, it's a great sermon, but sometimes it's like fully directed at you. And that was one of those ones where I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but for me it was like, oh my gosh, he's fully talking to me and I know what he's talking about, and this is the thing I'm going to step out in. So that's what kind of ignited the next steps. And I happened to be, because I have so much time, and I just happened to also at the time be teaching yoga, because that's just a good thing to also be doing. And so I'd been teaching yoga once a week in Waikuku at the hall there, and some of the people who came along I'd been getting to know quite well over the years. And one of my regular attendees just happened to be working in the local sort of wellbeing social space and had all these connections, and when I told her the vision that I had, she just immediately got excited and was like, yes, this is what we have to do, Phillipa, absolutely. And so she kind of came alongside me, and through her we sort of took the next steps of doing some public meetings and getting people involved and finding out other people who are passionate, and sort of pulled it together from there. And the interesting thing is that, we had identified this need, that there were all these agencies and community organisations who needed or could use food to, help their clients. But we just thought that the food would come. We're like, oh, that won't be a problem. There's so much food waste out there, because we know that a third of it is wasted, so it's going to be easy to find. But we ended up taking 18 months before anyone gave us food. So I spent like 18 months thinking I was just taking everyone down the garden path. It was just awful. Like, oh my gosh, are we ever going to find food? And when we finally did, it was like orange juice. So it wasn't like the perishable food I was expecting. And so it didn't kind of follow
narrative I was expecting, but then it all settled down in the end, and we're fine now. But it was that first 18 months was quite, and I was nervous for a lot of it because all these people thought it was a great idea, but I'm like, nothing's happening. But yeah, now we're here and it's good.
I know in some weird way I find that really encouraging because I think we're in such an instant society that it's really easy to feel like, oh, well, let's try this thing, and if it's not working in a week's time or in a month's time, we'll move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And to hear that you went, that long, still going, there's got to be something here.
Yeah.
I feel called to this in some way. I'm just going to keep persevering. And it's not, that's not blind faith, stupidity.
No.
That's going, no, there is something. I know the data, I know the facts. It's about making the right connections. It's, putting in the work. And now it's, how many years later?
Yeah, like over
a decade
10.
later?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going well, and, you've got these systems in place and these relationships in place that you wouldn't have had if you went, oh, we've been going for 3 months, but like nothing's happening, so maybe it's not a thing.
Yeah. So it was interesting that we were able to sustain it through that time. But I think everyone who'd kind of got on board understood the problem and saw what we were doing as such a good solution that, people just hung in there. I'm so grateful for that.
So what does your role look like within the organisation? Because I noticed when I did a bit of a look at the website, like a lot of people that start these things put themselves in as the CEO or the operations manager, and you've already said why you're not doing the food banky coalface stuff. But what is your role, and what does that look like in a week? Yeah,
so I'm the chairperson so it's a charitable trust, so I'm the chairperson of the Board of Trustees. But I'm also have quite a lot of operational input still, although I have tried to pull back a lot from that because we do have paid staff now. But I obviously chose not to be a staff member because I did have another job. And then also I really have come to realise over the last 10 years that I really enjoy governance.
Yep.
Which I know might seem strange to people, but I do. One of the things that I enjoy about it is that I can choose to do what I like and when I like because I'm not getting paid. Yeah. Obviously, I do need to be certainly a certain amount accountable. There are things that I have to do, but I do really like the freedom of not getting paid. And so, we've talked over the years about whether or not I should take on a paid role or, what that would look like, but we've never actually followed through with that because I just like not being paid. So on a day-to-day basis, so I tend to, at the moment, I commit 2 days a week pretty much to satisfy. Obviously I do other things on other days as well, as and when needed. I try to, my focus generally is around that sort of more strategic side of things, financial side of things. I'll get involved in meetings and stuff, which I know have a really good strategic influence or importance to the organisation. Because our manager, she's part-time, I support her a lot in that space because it's hard to manage something when you're part-time. So, it changes weekly, but yeah.
That's probably true for a lot of people working in charities that, you don't have a large corporate staff, so you do what you need to do.
Yeah.
But I like that you've positioned yourself in your areas of strength because A, that's going to be best for you and your longevity, and B, it's going to be best for the organisation because they're getting the best out of you, not the begrudging. And
it certainly didn't happen overnight. I mean, I took there were several years there where I felt like I was doing everything, and then I did pretty much almost crash, as so many of us do when we're doing non-profit work. But thankfully I recognised it soon enough to kind of get some support mechanisms in place and managed to get through that. And as the organisation has matured. We've, been able to afford to have more staff, and that's huge. Being able to just delegate things and giving people roles that look after the stuff that I used to do, and being happy for them to do that without hardly any oversight from me is huge, because I don't have to have my fingers in all the pies anymore. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned earlier on that one of the final pushes was at church. So for you, this connects to faith.
Yes.
Do you want to explain that a little bit? Like, where does this care about, how does caring about food waste connect to faith? How does caring about the environment connect to faith for you?
Yeah, I think part of it for me, again, goes back to my upbringing. I was brought up in a family, like, if you're asking my faith journey, I would say that, I've pretty much been a Christian my whole life. But I was brought up in a family where my mum was the Christian and my dad was the scientist.
Yep.
And so I've always had that lens of asking questions all the time. Like, my father always asked questions. And then also the lens of having a strong female role model who was a strong Christian female role model. So we didn't have that sort of, even though most of my formative years we were in a more conservative sort of Pentecostal church, I didn't even realise it was conservative because I saw my mum as my role model. So we didn't fit into those kind of stereotypes of growing up in sort of a Pentecostal family. And so I was able to see things, I think, in a different way. I wasn't... I hadn't been kind of positioned in a way to read things in a certain way or to understand things in a certain way. So when, I would read the Bible or hear different people talking from the pulpit or anything, it hadn't been tainted. I say tainted, other people probably wouldn't agree, but I see it as being tainted by maybe misinterpretation or, putting certain ideas above of others that maybe shouldn't be. And so, for me, it was just so clear that creation is an obvious way to know God. And strangely, the Bible tells you that. It's all through it. And so why wouldn't that be the way to get closer to God? So for me, it's always been in creation that, in fact, a lot of my sort of light bulb moments or, revelatory experiences have been while I've been outside or, in the mountaintops, all those sorts of things. And so it's always been reinforced throughout my life that is how I know God. And I mean, there's obviously other ways too, but for me, creation's a big part of that. And that idea that creation is good, that for some reason we tend to, as Christians, some tend to forget, and it's again so obvious when you read throughout all of Scripture. It's just so evident, and so for me, there's always been that really strong connection between the environment and looking after the environment. We're meant to be stewards, we're meant to be protectors, we're meant to be advocates for this beautiful earth that we've been kind of given and should be so grateful for. And I just feel like we take it for granted and don't kind of
there's a lot of letting natural kind of tendencies towards power and control allow us to interpret things as, like, when Genesis says rule over, especially in the post-Enlightenment Western world, as use this however you want, as opposed to steward, which the word that you brought up, I think is a much better way to translate that. Steward the earth, or the Māori idea of kaitiakitanga, of caring for and looking after and keeping something special for the next generations. And right at the beginning of Genesis, God, creates this garden, and we sort of forget that in that garden, obviously the purpose of the garden is creation itself, but there's also the purpose of the garden is to provide food for the people in the garden. And
then it's not that the food's there to just be taken and, like you're talking about, be used as a commodity or used as a power play. The food is there to sustain us and to nourish us and to give us life. And to kind of mess with that, and I feel like it has been messed with, and that we've lost that kind of connection to the value of what food means to us, and also the value of we can take it to just the aspect of food, or we can take it for the whole of our planet and our environment. That we've lost that connection, that vital connection of understanding of that it is the earth and the food from the earth that nourishes us and allows us to be the human beings we are. And without that, we can't have that spiritual connection. Anyway, we've got to have, even if they are temporary, these living bodies that we're in, we need to sustain them. They need to be nourished, and we can't lose that connection between our bodies and the fact that we are part of this ecosystem of the earth. And food has a huge role to play in that.
I think that's interesting that we often forget that when we're talking about creation or when we're talking about the environment, we're not separate from that. We're part of that.
Exactly.
And so it's not us and it. It's just us.
Yeah.
We're part of this bigger thing.
Yeah. And we've done a really good job of trying to divorce ourselves from that, with particularly with urbanisation. But of course, that's going to happen with the way development works, right? We're going to find ourselves in these places where we're all living closer together and therefore not quite as reliant on the sort of the natural environment around us. But we do need to keep reminding ourselves that it's because of the earth that we're here and we can't live without it. Yeah. So it needs to be valued as such, looked after as such. Yeah.
What brings you joy about working for Satisfy?
It's a good question. Well, I think it's that fact that it's working in that space that that it brings those two awesome things together. That we're making a big difference at reducing food waste, which has a huge impact on the environment. Like, if we could get into that, talk about those details further if you want. But then there's also the fact that we are helping with food poverty too, and just the fact that we're always doing that every day with the work that we do is brings a lot of satisfaction. And weirdly, obviously our name, Satisfy, when I chose that name, I was thinking it was because we were going to be satisfying others, and then obviously it's actually just as much for the people who do the work. It's a word that it provides satisfaction to those who are doing the work, satisfaction to those who, the organisations we're helping, and then also to their clients that they're also helping. So, I really like our name. Yeah. It's again, and I the name came to me from I feel like a group of verses that I sort of feel like are my commissioning verses, and it was from Isaiah, and it's talking about that people will be satisfied. And it also talks about being restored. So my original word was, maybe we could be restore. But then it's like, actually, Habitat for Humanity already has that one. So I did a little bit of searching before I came on to Satisfy, but I'm pleased that I did because, I think it's a great name.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who they've found a cause and they're burning with passion about this cause, and they're in that position where you were for 6 months of going, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
What's your encouragement for them?
Well, there's two sides of it, right? Like, if you are really passionate, and sometimes that passion can be sort of shown to you in the form of anger, which is okay, as long as you are able to channel that anger into action. And that, I suppose, can be the challenge, right? Finding the actions to challenge that passion or that anger into, so that you have those good outcomes. If you can't find that outlet, though, I believe quite strongly that God will find someone else to do it. Right. So yes, absolutely. If you've got that passion and it's not going away, and it's something that you want to get in, it's something that you really want to progress, it's all about talking to the right people, letting it sit there for a long time. It helps, I think, because you're basically testing it in that time of it sitting there. You're allowing God to kind of work in you and to kind of make that decision on whether or not it is truly something that you're going to be able to continue with over a long period of time, or if it's just a bit of a whim for today. So yes, sitting with it's fine. Finding people to talk to who are also interested in that or have a passion for that, because that's going to help you understand if it really is something that you have something to bring to the table or you can help in some kind of way. And then, like I said, if it goes away and you're not able, well, maybe the passion doesn't go away, but I don't think you should beat yourself up about it, because someone else will pick up on it and do it. But we're not all indispensable. We can God will use someone else. Yeah. But definitely go for it though if it's something you're passionate about. I'm so keen on promoting that for people to find their passions, because the job I've worked in for 18 years, I was kind of good at it, but I wasn't passionate about it. So that's why I set up Satisfy in some ways, because it's helped address the passions in me and allowed me to work more and within my strengths than, say, what my paid work did. And so, totally encourage people to lean into it and research stuff and find a way that they can contribute in a meaningful way. But then if it doesn't work, that's all okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do people find out more about Satisfy, support you, follow you, all the rest of that?
Well, we have a good website. So you can just go to satisfyfoodrescue.org.nz and find out all the information there. We're also on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. I think we might have just started a TikTok page, which is certainly not my department, and LinkedIn. Yeah, that's all our contact details are on there. Support-wise, if people are keen to support us, we always need more food. So if someone as a food donor has excess food in any way, then we love that, even from people's gardens. Like particularly, we're kind of getting to the end of harvest season now, but I know feijoas are on their way. But, any time that there's excess in your garden, particularly if you're in North Canterbury, kind of located near where we are, we take excess domestic produce and distribute that. People are keen to volunteer. We always have volunteering spots available, and people can come and help do our food sorting. We have a really great team of volunteers. They stick around for ages, so we obviously are doing something right. And then, obviously, charities always need money. So there's spots on the website that you can donate to us if you feel that way inclined as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for giving time to talk to us today.
No worries.
And thank you for running with your passion.
Yeah.
I guess it's one of those roles where you just don't know how many people you've managed to help.
Yeah.
And so, thank you on their behalf for the help that you've offered. Thank you for just your encouraging story, and thank you for what you're doing to bring a bit of heaven down to earth.
Oh, thank you. Really enjoyed chatting. It's been great.
Hello, hello heaven. Will I hear you whisper to come near?
I was really struck throughout our conversation by the humility that Phillipa brings to all of this. That humility that says, if not me, then someone else would have. But also a strength within that humility to go, but this is worth doing, so I'll use the strengths that I have to do what I can. It's a great encouragement for the rest of us to do what we can with what we have, no matter how big or how small. So thank you, Phillipa, for who you are and for what you do. Here is a blessing for you. Phillipa, as you continue the work of Satisfy, may you continue to be satisfied. That deep sense that through what you are doing, something wrong is being made more right in the world. May you continue to lean on the strengths of others to do the things that aren't your key strengths. And as you do, may you flourish even more as you live out of who you are and who you've been created to be. May your family thrive knowing that they, through their support of you, are making a difference in the world. And may they be inspired to find their own path towards bringing justice and goodness into the world. May your workers and your volunteers all know that satisfaction of which you spoke, knowing that they are part of something much bigger than themselves, being spreaders of divine love into the community around them, and may they know that divine love for themselves in whatever form that takes. May you continue to find your own connection to the divine in the environment around you, and by knowing your place within that environment. Lastly, may you know you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thanks to Strawn for the music and Rangi for the karakia. And as I mentioned at the start, join me next time for a conversation with Kate and Alex, founders of Common Grace Aotearoa, who are working to move the church towards collective political action in the areas of environmental justice, economic justice, and te tiriti o Waitangi. We explore what they are doing in all three spaces and how together we have the power to create systemic change. We also specifically cover the Treaty Principles Bill and why they, and Christians around the country, have stood up against this bill. It's another powerful conversation. Do join me. Until then, me I noi tātou.
E tō mātou matua I te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tau mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Homai kia mātou ai nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Muro o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga, e hara ana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e kawea, kia whakawaia, engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino.